Welcome back to another Made in Mary Design sewing tutorial. My name is Mary and I'm going to show you how to sew the Valencia top. The Valencia sewing pattern comes with two different styles. I'm going to show you in this video how to sew the classic tee that I'm wearing right now, and the second style included in the pattern is a puff sleeve top. To sew the classic tee, you're going to need a few things before getting started. You will need a sewing machine with both a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch, or you can opt to use a serger. You will still need the zigzag stitch for the hems of the sleeves and the shirt. You will also need a knit stretch fabric with a minimum stretch percentage of 60% and matching thread. To find the stretch percentage of a fabric, you can print the stretch percentage chart included in the pattern, and you can test your fabric by taking a section of it, pulling it until it meets resistance, and then the number that it lands on is the stretch percentage of that fabric. You can use a fabric for this pattern either with a two-way or a four-way stretch. This that I'm wearing right now is a two-way, so there's not much stretch vertically. If you use a four-way, you'll gain a little more length out of it. Either one works perfectly fine for this pattern. You also want to be sure that when you stretch your fabric, it's still opaque and it's not going to be see-through when you put it on and stretch it out. And if you're shopping for fabric online, you can typically find the stretch percentage in the product description under the fabric. If you would like to see some examples of fabrics that work well for this pattern, you can look at the fabric recommendations highlight on the Made in Mary Designs Instagram account, and you can find links to a few different fabrics that are suitable for the Valencia top. This pattern is designed with a mid-rise hem length, so it's longer than a crop, but not quite a full length either. It's sort of that in between, just there's a little bit of overlap between the pants or skirt and the top. If you would like to choose to customize the length for your height or based on your preferences, there are step-by-step instructions in the manual on how to lengthen or shorten the hem. And without further ado, let's sew the Valencia Classic tee.
For the purpose of this tutorial, I marked the wrong side of my fabric in chalk with an X. We're going to start with the back shirt facing right side up, and we're going to place the front shirt right side down and clip together at the shoulder. Sew the shoulder seams with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance. Set your machine to a zigzag or lightning bolt stitch using a 1 to 2 millimeter width and 2 to 2.5 millimeter length. You can see further instructions for the stitch settings on page 17 of the manual. It's also optional to use a serger, and you can do that in place of both the seam stitches and finishing the raw edges. After sewing our shoulder seam, we are going to finish the raw edge using a wider zigzag stitch. We'll set it between 4 to 5 millimeters for the width and 2.5 millimeters for the length. Now we're going to sew over the same stitches again at the shoulder. This time, instead of using the 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance, we're going to have that zigzag stitch right on the raw edge of the fabric so that the right side of the zigzag goes over the edge of the fabric and encloses that raw edge so that when the full shirt is complete, goes through the wash and is worn, the edges won't fray. If you're using a serger to sew your seams, you get to do it in one step. You don't have to finish the raw edge. It is just a single seam using that 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance. So likely a little bit of the fabric will be trimmed off. Using a low heat setting with a high steam setting, we're going to iron the seam allowances toward the back shirt. Moving on to preparing the neckband, we're going to fold the neckband with right sides together, matching the short ends. Pin the end of the neckband, then we're going to sew it with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you are using a zigzag stitch for this step, You do not need to finish the raw edge because we will be folding it and the raw edge will be fully enclosed within the neckband. Fold the seam allowance in half to find the center, then cut a 6 millimeter or 1/4 inch snip into the seam allowance. Careful not to cut through the stitch line. Fold the two sides of the seam allowance in opposite directions. Then we're going to fold the neckband lengthwise with wrong sides together all the way around the circle of the neckband. The purpose of doing this with the seam allowance is that the 4 layers of seam allowance can be quite bulky to sew through. And so we are splitting it so that it's 2 on each side. Makes it a little bit easier to attach the neckband to the neckline of our t-shirt. This step is called quartering the neckband. We're going to fold the neckband and place pins in it to create 4 equal sections before adding it to the neckline of our shirt. So, first, fold the neckband in half at the seam, and in the fold on the opposite end of the seam, place a pin. Then, after placing your first pin, we are going to match up the seam to our pin in the center, and on the opposite 2 sides in the folds, we're going to add a pin. Once all 4 pins are placed, we should have 4 equal sections of our neckband. Pin your neckband to the inside of the neckline, matching the neckband seam with the back shirt center notch and the opposite pin with the front shirt center notch. Next, pinch the neckband at the center front and the center back. Gently pull until the neckband is the same length as the neckline opening. Then you can pin the two in place at the shoulder seam. The side pins on the neckband should be about 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch in front of the shoulder seam. Sew around the neckline using a 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance. Pinch the fabric at 2 pins and gently pull the neckband until it matches the length of that section of the neckline. Sew between the 2 pins, then stop, remove the next pin, and repeat this process all the way around the neckband. As you adjust the fabric rotating around the neckband, make sure that all 3 layers of fabric are aligned at the raw edge so that as you sew, all 3 layers are being sewn into that seam. If you're sewing the neckline using a zigzag stitch, you will want to finish the raw edges using a wider zigzag stitch. For a serger, you will want to run the stitch off the edge of the fabric and tie off the loose ends of thread. Using low heat and high steam, press the seam allowance of the neckband toward the main bodice of the shirt. I like to do it first from the inside of the shirt and then pressing again from the outside so that it looks nice. And using the steam will help to set the seam allowance so that it doesn't roll out of the neckline while you're wearing it. Using a serger or a zigzag stitch, finish the raw hem of the classic tee sleeve. Lay the shirt flat with the right side up and place the classic tee sleeve on top with right sides together. We're going to use the notches to align the bell curve of the sleeve to the arm side, the curve of the armhole opening on the shirt. Here on the back side, we have 2 notches, and on the front side, we have 1 single notch and also 1 notch at the shoulder seam. Start by pinning that center notch to the shoulder seam, then pin the corner of the sleeve to the corner of the front shirt. Pin the front notch of the sleeve, the single notch, to the single notch on the shirt. Next, pin the corner of the sleeve on the back to the corner of the shirt. And last, pin the double notch on the back of the sleeve to the back of the shirt. Serge or zigzag stitch using a 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance. Sew with the sleeve side facing up and take it slowly as you go, adjusting the fabric so that there's no pinching or gathering within your seam. If you sew using a zigzag stitch, make sure to finish the raw edge by going back over a second time using a wider zigzag stitch. Lay the shirt flat and press the seam allowance of the sleeve toward the main bodice of the shirt. Press it first from the inside, then flip it over and press it again from the outside of the shirt. With right sides together, pin the shirt at the underarm seam of both sleeves, then flip it right side out just to make sure that those seams are perfectly aligned. Sew 3 to 5 short straight stitches. This is just to keep those seams aligned with one another. And then we can pin the side seams of our shirt, and we'll sew the side seams using a zigzag stitch or a serger with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 inch seam allowance. Especially with a serger, fabrics can tend to shift or slide underneath the presser foot, which is why we do the 3 to 5 short stitches beforehand, because we want those underarm seams to stay aligned with one another. So if there is any little bit of shifting, it'll help to keep those seams in place when we sew the side seam. Press the side seam of each side toward the back of the shirt. Zigzag stitch or serge the raw edge at the hem of the shirt. If finishing the raw edge caused your shirt to get a little bit wavy or ruffly, use a high steam setting to press the hem smooth. Next, we are going to fold the shirt toward the inside so that the wrong sides are together at 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch, and press, then pin. We will repeat this all the way around the shirt until the entire hem is pinned and ready to sew. To help reduce the bulk of the seam allowance, you can snip the seam allowance within the fold about 6 millimeters, then split the seam allowance in opposite directions, fold it back up, and pin. This is entirely optional, but it can help your presser foot to sew over that seam allowance if it's a little bit less bulky. Zigzag stitch all the way around the hem of the shirt using a 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 inch seam allowance from the edge of the fabric. Another tip to help your presser foot to move over the seam allowance without getting stuck is to use a pack of sewing needles and just place that case under the heel of the presser foot. Make sure it's not in the way of your needle, and it will just barely lift the back of the presser foot and balance it out so that it doesn't get stuck sewing over that bump. Now that we have a nice stretchy hem, we can use a steam setting on our iron to press out any of those little waves. Your classic tee is almost complete. We're at the last step. We are going to fold the sleeve hem inside with wrong sides together, 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch. Press and repeat all the way around the sleeve, and then repeat on the second sleeve as well. Pin in place, and then we will sew a zigzag stitch 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch from the edge of the fabric. After top stitching all the way around the hems of both sleeves, you can use a steam setting to press the hems nice and neat, and then your Valencia tee is complete. Beautifully done. Your Valencia top is ready to wear. I hope you enjoyed the process of sewing this garment and wear it for many years to come. If you'd like to tag at Maiden Mary Designs and the hashtag Valencia Top on Instagram, I would be overjoyed to see your finished garment.